Alright, guys, this is part two of the pro-natalist grooming and control. Um, this Catholic Church article that I'm about to read to you guys is basically in the spirit of defending the LGBT community and the whole accusations that drag queens are groomers. Um, I'm a little late to this, obviously, but we all know this story. Anyways, the parish transfers of abusive Catholic priests, also known as priest shuffling, is a pastoral practice that has greatly contributed to the aggravated aggravation of Catholic Church sexual abuse cases. Some bishops have been heavily criticized for moving offended priests from parish to parish where they still had personal contact with children rather than seeking to have them permanently returned to the lay state by laziation. The church was widely criticized when it was discovered that some bishops knew about some of the alleged crimes committed, but reassigned the accused instead of seeking to have them permanently removed from the priesthood. By country, Australia. Cardinal George Pell sat on a committee that approved moving Australia's most notorious sexually abusive priest Gerald Ridsdale from parish to parish dozens of times, including Mildura, Swan Hill, Warrnambool, Apollo Bay, Ballarat, and Mortlake, quote, allowing the priest to abuse countless more children while keeping the scandal under wraps. So, I'm going to continue reading this for a bit, but I think for the most part, we're going to understand and get the idea that you've heard from different people countless other times, but it's obviously very important. So, anyways, Australia. Joseph Seidnitzer, 1920, Innsbruck, 1930, 1993, was an Australian priest, missionary, and the founder and director of Priestwork, who was convicted multiple times for sexual abuse of boys aged 18 and over. At the time, people younger than 21 were considered underage. His criminal method was to invite young men in his apartment, make them obedient with liquors, and then force them to perform sexual acts. The Tages and Ziegler in 2010 described Zensneder's life as, quote, the classic biography of an abusive priest of his time. Despite his repeated relapses, the church sought to cover the assaults, gave him new opportunities, and simply moved him to other places. He was convicted several times in this process. In 1954, Seidnitzer was convicted to 8 months of heavy dungeon in Styria. In 1958, to one heavy dungeon, quote, aggravated by a hard bed in Innsbruck. And in 1960s, after committing 2 sexual assaults in Interlaken and fleeing, he was arrested in Innsbruck and again convicted to 14 months imprisonment there. The church allowed him to found his organization Priestwork in 1973. Although he was suspended in 1979, Bishop Pivel Eliska rehabilitated Seidnitzer inside the church in 1991, and after Seidnitzer's death in 1993, Ilinka renamed his organization Familie Mariens, or Family of Mary, and secured papal recognition for the organization in 1995. Belgium. In 2010, Belgian Chamber of Representatives installed the Special Commission on Sexual Abuse to investigate sexual abuse in power relations, especially within the Catholic Church. The follow-up commission on sexual abuse produced a report in 2011 that included a regulation that no convicted priest may be moved to another parish where he could once again come in contact with children, and the Catholic Church in Belgium agreed to stop this practice. Nevertheless, Bishop Joseph D. Cassel of Bruges tried to appoint a priest convicted of molestation in 2008 to the parish of Middelkerk in 2014. Why? Okay, I feel like they're looking out to do this. They're looking at these people's track records and they're like, okay, this one has a record. Put him in. All right. The priest eventually backed down from the appointment. Dr. de Kessel apologized to any sexual abuse victims he might have offended when the follow-up commission asked him for clarification. Fuck you, dude. Brazil. Uh, uh, Tarcisco Tadu Priquigo was arrested. Sperkigo was arrested after his checklist for choosing victims was found and given to the police. He had molested children in at least 5 parishes he was moved to. In November 2005, he was sentenced to a prison term of over 14 years. The case was one of those featured in an episode of the BBC's Panorama documentary series titled Sex Crimes in the Vatican, 2006, and became an example of the Vatican's policies regarding PDF file priests. Yo, sorry, copyright claim language, trying not to get immediately struck down. Alright, Canada. In August 2006, Catholic priest Charles Sylvester pleaded guilty to sexually assaulting 47 girls aged 7 to 15 between 1954 and 1986. For 2 decades, the police buried all filed reports instead of acting on them, while the Catholic Church repeatedly solved all those complaints and accusations by moving Sylvester to a new parish, including Blue Water, Ontario, where he was first reported, an unnamed place in Quebec, then Delhi, London, Windsor, Chatham, Kent, and Paincourt, all in Ontario, where he made new victims. He died 3 months into his 3-year jail term. Jeez, dude must have been old or he was murdered. Doesn't really say. I'm gonna go with he was old. I guess I could look into it, but good, he's dead. Alright, France. Bernard Preynat is a French former priest who committed multiple sexual assaults against children at a Boy Scout camp in Sainte-Foy-les-Lidan to do penance under the supervision of Father Jean Plaquet. Inhabitants of the village appear to be well aware that he was there as the church punishment for sexual transgressions. Though only through rumors, they were not always correct. As of 2016, there were no known cases of sexual abuse by Preynat in New Lycée. In 1999, Cardinal Louis-Marie Bellet transferred Preynat to Cours-la-Ville, Rhône department, where he was allowed to work with children again. In February 2016, parents accused Preynat of having possibly sexually abused their daughters during an irregular confessional session there in 2003. In June 2011, a former victim named Laurent came forward accusing Preynat of having sexually assaulted him in Sainte-Foy-les-Lions from 1979 to 1982. In September 2011, Cardinal Philippe Barberin moved Preynat to Les Coutures, Loire department, where he was appointed in a priestly function with his penance apparently being being over. He was allowed to work with children again, although he was under high surveillance by other adults to make sure he was never alone with the child. In September 2014, former victim tracked down Paynet and began to campaign for him to be prosecuted. He was allowed to work with children until August 2015, and in November 2015, Paynet was indicted and his ecclesiastical court case began. On the 27th January 2016, his secular court case began. Paynet was defrocked by the Catholic Church in July 2019, and on 16th March 2020, he was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment by the criminal court by Lyon. I feel like these come far too late at the end of these people's careers, so it's almost like justice really doesn't actually end up coming up because these people's lives are ruined, and then, I mean, honestly, comparison to how long they should have been locked up and imprisoned, these people don't get to see them get that way, and they pretty much get nothing out of it. I feel like money doesn't really solve it. You just, like, depending on the person you are, the only way you can cope with money is eating or drinking or something. Like, honestly, I'm not saying that's how all victims of sexual abuse deal with it, but, like, you can just get raped 50 times and then be given $20 million, but I don't think that solves shit. Jesus Christ. Okay. A well-documented case involves Peter Kramer, ordained as priest in Viatek in 1997, who abused 2 boys in 1999 and was convicted to 3 years probation in 2000, in which time he was barred from working with children and had to undergo therapy. However, in 2001, he was transferred to a parish in Reichhofen where he worked with young children again. Violating the court order. And in 2004, he was officially appointed as the priest of Reichhofen. Bishop Manfred Mueller and Bishop Gerhold Ludwig Mueller was accused of mishandling the case, with the presiding judge commenting, quote, "To send a priest convicted of abuse back into a parish is like a bank employing a criminal convicted of fraud as a treasurer." Kramer was imprisoned for 8 years in 2010. I don't know, the people who have all the wealth pretty much do act as fraud, and you could look at wealth hoarding in that way, yes. I guess this is a bit different. Anyways, on September 25th, 2018, the German Catholic Bishops' Conference released a report which it commissioned in 2014 that reported that 3,677 children in Germany, mostly boys under age 13, were sexually abused by Catholic clergy members over the past seven decades. About 1,670 church workers, or 4.4% of the clergy, had been involved in the abuse. In 60% of the cases, the alleged offenders escaped justice. In many of these instances, the accused priest was simply relocated to another parish without informing the new community about his alleged past crimes. By systematically moving the priest, the church attempted to hush up their crimes. So you know those predator trackers you can have on your phone and just see in your community where there might be a sexual somebody with a record. I bet you they don't have the record on the priests in your neighborhood, so you would never know. Like, so if that's the case, this is just like they are above that standard. So I'm gonna assume that if you used one of those apps, you could find them, but I'm gonna be conspiracy brain and say they're above that in some fucked up way. Alright. On the 20th of January 2022, a team of 5 lawyers of Westphal Spiker Wallstow published a 2,000-plus page investigative report on child sexual abuse cases in Archdiocese of Munich and Freising, and the ecclesiastical response to them, finding that Joseph Ratzinger, Archbishop of Munich and Freising, 1977 to 1982, Later, Pope Benedict XVI, 2005 to 2013, mishandled 4 cases. In one case, first revealed in 2010, the Church had known that priest Peter H. had abused children. For example, it since knew the late 1970s that he had been given an 11-year-old boy alcohol and had repeatedly abused him in Essen, but he was appointed to new positions and could therefore continue his spree of abuse for 30 years. H. was then transferred to the Munich Archdiocese for therapy, but soon reappointed as priest, and he was resumed sexually abusing children. Wow. Even after receiving a criminal condemnation in 1986, he would not cease the abuse. In response to the Wastel report, an ex-Pope Benedict Ratzinger denied having known about H's past abuse and said he was not present at the January 1980s diocesan meeting at which the decision was made to transfer H from Essen to Munich. However, the lawyer's team showed in the minutes of meeting that Ratzinger had been present and concluded that he had to have known about H's past abuse. Alright. Pretty short. Alright, Ireland. Tony Walsh was a Catholic priest who, according to Chapter 19 of the Murphy Report, published in 2010, quote, was moved from one parish to the next to prevent a scandal, and kept on abusing children even though a suspicion knew about it. Sort of like how colleges will hide sexual abuse scandals, like at a frat party or something. Alright. Italy, journalist Gianluigi Nuzzi compiled a number of cases of parochial transfers of alleged pedosexual priests in Italy. For example, in 1980, a priest who molested a boy in a school parish of Vallehiga in the Roman Catholic Diocese of Savonarola was moved 10 kilometers away to Spontorno to supervise a Boy Scout troop at the local Catholic Church Center, where new complaints were made against him. Bishop Dante Lancraconi of Savona then moved a few kilometers away to the community center for troubled youths in Orco Foglino. Former diocesan treasurer Carlo Rabagalati warned Domenico Calzagano, who became a new bishop of Savano in 2002, about the danger of this priest became his daily contact with minors, and Calcagno dismissed his concerns as mere rumors. A victim of abuse who contacted Calgano was not told to take the priest to court because the priest, quote, might commit suicide and that would have been on my conscience. That's ridiculous. In 2003, Calgano finally wrote a letter to Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger for advice, providing a full documentation of claims of sexual abuse by the priest since 1980. Ratzinger, who became Pope Benedict XVI 2 years later, is not known to have replied, but the priest in question was later moved to Pordio Magnon, 12 km from Maglino, to another Boy Scout camp where he was once again reported for sexual molestation. He remained in holy orders until voluntary quitting the priesthood in 2010 without any prosecution. I'm wondering if he had been found out one more time while he was in the priesthood, he would have had something severe hammered down onto him, but he decided to opt out at the last second or something. Why would he now opt out and not be a priest anymore? This is kind of weird. I just think it was to avoid crimes. Although now that he's not a high figure anymore, you'd think it would be easier to catch him. Anyways, Netherlands. On the 14th September 2018, NRC Handelsblad compiled a list of Roman Catholic cardinals and bishops in the Netherlands who ineptly dealt with accusations of child sex abuse, including parochial transfers of suspects. At least 16 cardinals, bishops, and auxiliary bishops transferred known sexual priests to other parishes, all of whom no longer in a holy order, and their cases are all exceeded in the statute of limitations by the time of NRC publication. The next day, a spokesperson of the Roman Catholic Church in the Netherlands confirmed that NRC's investigation was carefully conducted and the findings were largely correct. Cardinal Bernardus Alfrink, Archbishop of Utrecht, from 1955 to 1975, moved a pastor sentenced to 4 months in prison for abuse of underage girls. From Zutphen to Slagfaren in 1956, and later to Nettenden, where he abused another girl in 1967. Altfrink ignored a warning letter from another pastor and moved the convicted pastor to Imnes and then to Lunteren. The cardinal did not intervene in the chaplain's case in Grunello, moved another pastor to Harl, where he molested again, and promoted an Utrecht chaplain who confessed to abusing boys to a priest in Bramt, where he continued abusing children, and promoted an Arnhem chaplain known to have abused altar services to pastor in Albergen, where he abused another 9 altar services. These people are just like giving winks at each other as they go in and out of these fucking ranks. Jesus Christ. Alright. Cardinal Adrianus Simonus, Bishop of Rotterdam, 1970 to 1983, and Archbishop of Utrecht, 1983 to 2007, ignored well-documented accusations against the Albergen pastor in 1983. He appointed a man that he knew was convicted of sexual abuse of boys in 1990 in Zoetermeer to pastor 1991 in Amersfoort, where he abused children again, and did not prevent in 2005 appointment to pastor in Eindhoven. He ignored the victim's letter against auxiliary bishop Jan Nijenhuis in 2000, and in 2007 ordained a father known to have abused pupils in the Twello Boys boarding school to allocate in Oldenzaal. In 2010, he said on live television show Paul and Witteman that "Wire haben us nutch," and which means we did not know about it. You knew about it. Alright. Martinus, Bishop of Rotterdam, 1956 to 1970. In 1965, reappointed a priest convicted of molestation elsewhere in his diocese. He also appointed a priest that he knew had committed sexual abuse in a pastoral relation in 1965 to a religious teacher in Odin Bosch Boys boarding school. The priest went on to sexually abuse 300 age boys there since 1970. Okay. Philip Barr, Bishop of Rotterdam, 1983 to 1993, transferred multiple priests accused of found guilty of abuse to other dioceses where he could no longer maintain their position in his own. Did not undertake action in at least 5 cases, and is known to have had sex with underage students of his own priestly seminary. Ad von Leyen, Bishop of Rotterdam, 1993-2011, when leading a Cilician congregation in 1979, urged the police to stop prosecuting a priest in a case of sexual abuse. The suspect was transferred to a parish in Zerneizen, where he abused children again. In 1995, he appointed a priest who had already confessed to abusing children in 20 separate cases to doing pastoral and youth work. When the priest transgressed again, Van Leyen waited 6 months before transferring him to Amersfoort in the Archdiocese of Utrecht, where he once again abused children. He ignored complaints by 3 victims in 2002, 2008, and 2010 and covered them up. Julia May Lemons, Bishop of Foremund, 1932 to 1957, maintained a priest in his diocese for 20 years, even though he knew the man was convicted in 1941 for abusing 2 boys and a girl in Sittard. He died in 1960. In 2011, the diocese acknowledged that in 1946 complaint against the priest for abusing a 7-year-old girl in Dianrag was valid, and that the priest in question, then director of the Hale Lunatic Asylum in the Sittard Hospital, was examined by the police again in 1951. Petrus Moors, Bishop of Foremund, 1959-1970, appointed a Belgian priest, knowing he had been convicted of sexually abusing boys, to chaplain in Brockham, Valkenburg in 1959, where the chaplain abused boys once more. Nevertheless, Moores appointed a chaplain in 1966 to Helsberg and in 1968 to Venlo, where he transgressed again. Moores did not act against a chaplain known to have abused multiple children, and chaplain went on to rape a 17-year-old girl in Heerland in 1961. Despite numerous warnings, the man remained a pastor in Frost Esding and later Puthshinen until 1982. In 1969, Bishop Moores transferred a chaplain from Maastricht, where he was known to have abused children, to Thorn, where the chaplain struck again. He appointed a Rolduc seminary teacher who had previously abused underage boys to pastor in Sittard and Tegelen. Like, this has to be some initiation that pastors and priests just do and go through in order to actually be accepted amongst the ranks. And it's like, if you can get away with it, then you're given like a star of fucking sicko approval. What the hell? Okay. Wilhelmus Mozart's, Bishop of Den Bosch, in 1957 moved a grave chaplain to New Parish in Tilburg, knowing he had abused an altar server very frequently, personally seeing it to that the matter received no publicity. In 1959, he moved the chaplain again to an institute for deaf-mute children in St. Michiel-Gestel. One of his victims was later paid €15 for pain and suffering. That's horrible. Again, money's not going to solve that. Jan Blyson, Bishop of Den Bosch, 1966-1983, transferred an Oosterwijk pastor, imprisoned for 3 months in 1968 for abusing 6 altar services to the Diocese of Groningen, where he became chaplain in Sneek that same year, and later pastor in Groningen City. The victims were ordered to remain silent and not given any care. Decades later, 5 of the victims got a combined compensation of almost $100,000. Nice. I mean, not really, but still. Blyson also destroyed documents implicating several clerics in the 1970s. Antoon Herkmans, Bishop of Den Bosch, 1998 to 2016. In 2004, appointed a priest to pastor in Helmand. That priest had 2 years earlier resigned from his position of director of the Episcopal Priest Seminary after accusations of rape and sexual abuse of boys. Martin de Groot, acting Bishop of Haarlem, 1966. In 1966, transferred a chaplain from Den Harder to a parish in Amsterdam. The chaplain had been convicted of abuse in 1958. Theodorus Zwartkruis, Bishop of Haarlem, Amsterdam, 1966 to 1983. In 1970, transferred a chaplain convicted for abuse from Amsterdam to the Diocese of Groningen, where he became a pastor in Emmeloord. Zwartkruis did not inform Groningen's Bishop Bernhard Moller about the chaplain's criminal history. He also transferred another chaplain 3 times between 1974 and 1984. 1974 and 1983. After complaints of child abuse, Zwickris had a policy of ignoring and destroying anonymous letters implicating abusive priests. I mean, that's obvious that they do this. There's no other way this would be happening if it wasn't for purposefully trying to cover up the evidence. Peter Neerman, Bishop of Groningen, Leeuwarden, 1956 to 1969, appointed an Oysterwick pastor who had in 1968 been convicted of sexually abusing 6 underage boys, to chaplain in Sneek that same year, and later to pastor in Groningen. Joseph Bateson, Bishop of Breda, 1951 to 1962, in 1956 appointed a known PDF sexual pastor from a parish on the Isle of Texel, Diocese of Haarlem, to the Zeelandic village of Hensweet, where the pastor transgressed again in 1959 and received a 1-month suspended sentence. What? Then the bishop transferred him to the Catholic hospital in Hertsteren. In 2005, the Roman Catholic Church in the Netherlands introduced an obligatory screening of any priest's criminal records before any appointment can take place, and since 2014 clerics are required to provide evidence of good behavior. Okay. Poland. In May 2019, the documentary Tell No One claimed, amongst other things, that the Polish church moved known PDF file priests from parish to parish, as happened in other countries. One string of transfers is documented extensively by victims of Father. I bet these names are like this on purpose, just to fucking lead you off the trail or something. Or I'm just being racist. Man, I'm Polish, so that's pretty bad. Andrzej Srebczynski, led by Marek Lewinsky, Mark Kartuzzi, who claims to have been sexually abused and raped multiple times from the age of 13 until he attempted suicide and was hospitalized in 1987. Treating Dr. Irina Droula wrote a letter to Bishop Mariana of Chelmno, informing him of the abuse and rape of Miłodzki. Bishop Pierkutki responded on the 20th of January 1988, writing, quote, I am familiar with the case. After the retreat program, the priest was moved to another place under the penalty that should this crime repeat, he'll be deprived of the possibility of performing his priestly vocation, end quote. Nothing else was done with Miłodzki's complaints, who recounts, quote, years later, we found out that he was moved to Weldrohu, then to Zerna, a small town close to Zurich, then to Papawao, Bisquipi, then much further to Zano, close to Brodinka, and he was a parish priest there until 2013, until 10 victims came to me personally. Although Pope Francis finally defrocked Srebczynski in 2017, the 28 years after the Milewinski case was reported, he was seen participating during the June 2017 Lady of Fatima procession in Mogilno in full liturgical garment. Alright. In December 2022, Poland-based Dutch investigative journalist Ek Overbeek stated in an interview that his 3-year research in Polish archives had revealed evidence that Pope John III, during his time as Archbishop Karol Wojtyla of Krakow, 1962 to 1998, had known about sexual abuse of minors by priests in at least 4 cases but had covered it up. This included cases in which priests who had been convicted for sexual abuse had spent time in prison were again appointed by Wojtyla as priests in another diocese after their release from prison. Overbeek's allegations were challenged by 2 Polish journalists, Piotr Litka and Tomasz Kryzak. However, who found that the future Pope, quote, did not cover up any abuse and consistently acted against such cases during his time as Archbishop of Krakow from 1964 to 1978, end quote, having placed sanctions on priests found guilty of the sexual abuse of minors as much as his authority allowed, in the words of the Catholic news agency. Quote, the journalist said that Wojtyla made all the necessary decisions at that moment. The quick removal of the priest from the parish, the suspension until the matter was resolved, and the obligation to live in a monastery where civil authorities had then arrested him. End quote. Liska and Kryzak note that one of the priests mentioned by Overbeek, Eugene Sergeant, was from the diocese of Lubozow, and not the Archdiocese of Krakow, and therefore Wojtyla could have no influence on the fact that he was transferred to another diocese. Yeah, they do this on purpose just to confuse people. Like, it doesn't even matter. Like, as long as they can get away with it. Honestly. Alright, Switzerland. In January 2018, a group of victims came forward in the canton of Valais, saying they represented about 50 victims of sexual abuse and accusing around 10 Catholic priests, 3 of whom still alive in the Diocese of Sion. One victim claimed that, quote, previous bishops had known about the sexual abuse but had not done anything except move some priests to other parishes. Bishop Jean-Marie Lovey responded by admitting priests who were moved to other parishes, quote, as a preventive measure, end quote, but denying that attempts were made to cover up the sexual abuse. Wow. Of course there were attempts to cover it up. Why would you move them? That's a part of a cover-up. You don't even have to make anything up if that's all you have to do. Anyways. The United Kingdom. James Robinson worked in parishes in the English Midlands, and when an accusation of child abuse happened in the 1980s, the Roman Catholic Church allowed him to escape to the United States. Though they knew about an unwholesome relationship the priest had with the boy, Robinson remained free for over 20 years till the first decade of the 21st century. He was extradited back to the UK to force charges. Robinson has received a 21-year-old prison sentence for multiple child sex offenses. The Roman Catholic Church paid Robinson up to 800 per month, 800 pounds per month, despite knowing the allegations against him. All right, the United States, good old U.S. of A. All right, overview. According to the 2004 John Jay report, 3% of all priests against whom allegations were made were convicted, and about 2% received prison sentences. This is not surprising at all. Instead of reporting the incidents to police, many dioceses directed the offending priest to seek psychological treatment and assessment. According to John Jay report, nearly 40% of the priests alleged to have committed sexual abuse participated in treatment programs. The more allegations a priest had, the more likely he was to participate in treatment. From a legal perspective, the most serious criticisms, aside from the incidents of child sex abuse themselves, was by the bishops, who failed to report accusations to the police. So considering this is just who they are, they're just receiving treatment as damage control. There's like no actual way to treat yourself from an urge like this. You just got to be locked up or, you know, be put in a box or something. Um, at at the very least, house arrest. But these people are in cahoots. There's a whole organization. This is not just like a one individual did a creepy, fucked up thing. Um, okay. Forgot where I was. Public school administrators acted in a similar manner when dealing with accused teachers, as did the Boy Scouts of America. In response to the failure of many organizations to report abuse to the police, lawmakers have changed the law to make reporting an abuse to police compulsory. In 2002, Massachusetts passed a law requiring religious officials to report the abuse of children. In response to these allegations, both ecclesiastical and civil authorities have implemented procedures to prevent sexual abuse of minors by clergy and to report and punish it if it when it occurs. On March 6, 2020, a joint investigation concluded by Publica and the Houston Chronicles was published when revealed that the Catholic Church transferred more than 50 credibly accused U.S. Catholic clergy to other countries after accusations surfaced against them. Yeah, this is not surprising at all, obviously. Okay, Archdiocese of Boston. In the Archdiocese of Boston, John Gale was shifted from one parish to another. Although Cardinal Bernard Law, Bishop of Boston 1984 to 2002, have been informed of his sexual misconduct on a number of occasions, such as in December 1984 when Auxiliary Bishop John M. D'Arcy wrote to Cardinal Law complaining about Golphin's reassignment to another Boston area parish because of his history of homosexual involvement with young boys. Oh, they would love to use that excuse. Okay, another example was the case of Joseph Birmingham, who was assigned to a number of parishes over a period of 23 years during when he molested a number of children. In response to a 1987 letter from the mother of an altar boy inquiring to whether Birmingham had a history of molesting children, Cardinal Law replied, reassuring her that there was no factual basis for her concern. Okay. Archdiocese of Los Angeles. In the Roman Catholic Diocese of Orange, Auxiliary Bishop Michael Patrick Driscoll, 1990, 1997, 1999, sorry, holy shit, accepted and transferred priests despite reports of sexual misconduct. On 17th May 2005, the Diocese of Orange released over 10,000 pages of documents from the personal files of 15 priests and teachers as part of the court approval $10 million settlement reached in December 2004 between the diocese and 90 alleged victims of sexual abuse. The documents showed inter alia that the church had been shuffling priests who molested children from parish to parish, from diocese to diocese, for more than 2 decades. For example, it transferred one serial molester to the Archdiocese of Tijuana. It also welcomed a convicted child abuser from another state, knowing that it was already accused of a new transgression. When the latter was accused yet again, the diocese sent him to a rehabilitation center in New Mexico with a notation, "No one else will take you." What the fuck? Okay, the documents also revealed that bishops in Milwaukee Baker and Tijuana were complicit in helping the Diocese of Orange shuffle molesting priests around. Alright, Archdiocese of Philadelphia. In 2005, grand jury reports cited evidence that both Cardinal John Kroll, Archbishop of Philadelphia 1961-1988, and his successor, Cardinal Anthony Bellavicqua, 1988 to 2003, had allowed dozens of sexually abusive priests to stay in holy orders by transferring them from parish to parish to avoid a scandal. The case of Gerard W. Chambers was cited as exemplary for the Archdiocese's standing policy of transferring sexually abusive priests from parish to parish in order to avoid disclosure and scandal. In his 21 years of active ministry, the Archdiocese of Philadelphia assigned him to 27 different parishes with full access to children. During nearly half of those years, Chambers was on health leaves and in treatment facilities, apparently each time after accusations of sexual abuse of children emerged against him. What? Okay. He was put on permanent health leave in 1963 and died in 1974 after 4 chamber victims from his 14th and 15th assignments came forward to the Archdiocese in 1994. Church officials said they had destroyed all of the chamber's personal records from his ministry career. Of course they did. Yeah, so obviously these people are the true groomers. I'm just skipping, guys, because this is some messed up shit. Okay. So let's hear the advice from the Catholic Church. The best medical advice available at the time, in quotes. Um, Defenders of the Church's actions have suggested that in reassigning priests after treatment, bishops were acting on the best medical advice then available, a policy also followed by the U.S. public school system when dealing with accused teachers. Some bishops and psychiatrists have asserted that the prevailing psychology of the time suggested that people could be cured of such behavior through counseling. Many of the abusive priests had received counseling before being reassigned. Um, Responses to criticism. In response to criticism that the Catholic hierarchy should have acted more quickly and decisively to remove priests accused of sexual misconduct, contemporary bishops have responded that the hierarchy was unaware until recent years of the dangers in the shuffling priests from one parish to another, and concealing the priests' problems from those they served. For example, Cardinal Roger Mahony of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles said, quote, "We have said repeatedly that our understanding of this problem and the ways it's dealt with today evolved, and that decades ago, people didn't realize how serious this was, and so, rather than pulling people out of the ministry directly and fully, they were moved." Um, you don't. Oh, all right. This just sounds like an excuse. You don't move somebody who's literally on fire into a wooden building, and the wood is basically the children in this case. Like, what is wrong with you? Oh, okay. I'll see you guys in the next video.